Well, it's the first week of February back in the greenhouse, and as you can see, it's a rather rainy, cold morning in February. I'll just give you a quick look at the greenhouse. This last month has been spent trapping mice. I had a little bit of a mouse problem, noticed some missing blooms on a few of my orchids, and have been setting what are called live traps. You can see one here on the floor of the greenhouse. And I bait with peanut butter, and believe it or not, over the last 30 days in January, I have caught a total of 31 mice in my greenhouse. So I can now see why I was getting root damage, I was losing seedlings. Much worse problem than I thought. And I did find a latch on a side window that had broken and was allowing a little bit of a gap to develop. And I think that's where most of the mice were coming from. And for about 4 or 5 days, I caught absolutely no mice. I thought I solved the problem. This morning, walked out, and there were 2 mice in one of my traps. So I still have a problem, and I'm still going to have to look and try to figure out how they're getting into the greenhouse. But hopefully that problem will be behind us as we move into the spring and I get better rodent control. So looking at a few things that are going on in the greenhouse in early February. This is a pretty nice development. This is Rhynchostylus gigantea. I've had this plant for about 6 years, and it hadn't bloomed other than the first year I got it from Joe Ambritz of down in Carpinteria. I moved it to a brighter location here on the front of the greenhouse, and so hopefully in about another 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to start to see some really nice dark purple flowers on the Rhynchostylus. The Renathera that I showed you developing a spike is now in bloom, a little Insidium next to it. But what's really great is Renathera Red Dragon is now coming into fuller bloom. The blossoms are opening, and that's the lower flower spike, and then the upper flower spike is developing nicely as well. The Cataseum that was in full bloom in January has just got a few remaining flowers on it. But it is pretty much done. And as you can see, the leaves have dropped. The pseudobulbs are now going into full winter dormancy. Of course, my Vanda still doing extremely well. And this is one of my 2 Vandas. This one has the bloom spike developing on the small growth now at the bottom. And so in about another month or 2, we'll start to see that flower spike opening as well. Second Vanda, Picara's Delight. This is, again, the 3rd spike that's developed in about the last 6 months. Just a fantastic purple color, and always impressive when it's in bloom. And as I said, this is the first year these 2 Vandas have bloomed in succession, 3 flower spikes, which is quite nice. If you remember from January, this was in full bloom. Cattleya perseviliana, the flowers are now pretty much gone. Same with the perseviliana that was in the basket. Laelias and Vandas pretty much ending the bloom time. Blooms are fading, and we'll see them again in another year. A few more Laelias relatives are getting ready to bloom, some pretty nice buds developing. This is the Mackie hybrid. I bought the flask from Sunset Valley Orchids a number of years ago, and I've got a number of these seedlings that are blooming throughout the greenhouse. This is a very nice dark version. Whenever you get a flask, you usually get a number of small seedlings that are just tiny, and most people will just discard them. They're very low viability. I just scattered them on this pot of ficus growing in the greenhouse, and here we are 7 years later, and these little tiny seedlings that were probably 1/4 of an inch long from the flask is blooming, and it's turned out to be a really nice plant. So I encourage you, if you do pot out plants from flasks and you've got a number of little small seedlings, just scatter them on a pot, and you're not going to lose anything. You may develop a pretty nice plant in 6 or 7 years. The Miltonia continues to send up flower spikes, which is really surprising to me. Usually this has a much more pronounced bloom season in the spring, but it just keeps turning out bloom spikes. And here's a Dendrobium kingianum. My kingianums are now starting to come into flower. This is a particular variety from one of good friends at the Orchid Society, Chris Erler, named the variety when he won an award after his wife, Betsy. So this is Dendrobium kingianum Betsy, which also has a very nice fragrance to it. And again, a very, very hardy orchid. Another Laelia type from Flask from Sunset Valley Orchids. I believe this is Orchid Small Fortune. And I'll put some names into this video when I get back and process it so that you get the exact names for some of these we're seeing. A Laelia anceps hybrid, which blooms in very large flowers and a little bit later than the typical Laelia anceps, which, as you can see, Laelia anceps is pretty much done blooming right now. Another of the Small Fortune. And then this is a interesting Laelia rubescens. And I wasn't sure what to expect with this. It's a fairly small flower. And this came from Equigenera, and I spotted it on their website. And it's an interesting, smaller blooming Laelia. And I hadn't seen it before, so I was real interested to see what the flowers would look like. And it's a fairly attractive miniature Laelia. So we'll see how big that gets in the future. And then moving right along, more mousetraps, as you can see. Another Dendrobium kingianum on the sunnier side of the greenhouse. And again, these can be grown outside in frost-free areas. And I actually have a few that are growing outdoors in sheltered locations in my garden. And so if you're in an area where you don't think you can grow orchids outdoors, Dendrobium kingianum and speciosum are two that you consider. And then we'll show you this one. This is a hybrid of the two called delicata, Dendrobium delicata. And it is developing flower spikes, and we'll see that blooming with white flowers here in another 3 or 4 weeks. And then moving right along, just want to show you the cross between Laelia anceps and Cattleya persivaliana that was in bud last month is now in full bloom. And this is LC Caligula. And it's just a really fantastic orchid. I think there's 6 bloom spikes and there's probably 4 flowers on each spike. But pretty impressive specimen plant. And then prolonging the Laelia blooming season, Laelia canarensis is a primary hybrid of Laelia anceps and an orange rupiculus or rock-dwelling orchid. And this is Laelia canarensis. Really nice glowing yellow flowers. This particular one is Hawaii Gold. And a slightly paler hybrid, same parents, is another Laelia canarensis, and this one is Golden Glow. So again, if you like Laelia anceps, like yellow color and want to extend the bloom season, this blooms just as the standard colored Laelia anceps species is finishing its bloom. So it's kind of nice to add that to the collection. And one other thing I wanted to point out, here's an intergeneric. You may see these in some big box stores. This one came from Gallup and Stribling down in Santa Barbara and is a cross between an oncidium, I believe, and an odontoglossum. But just really great spikes of a pretty dark, intense red flower. And it sounds like the rain is easing up a little bit outside, so that's good. This is an oncidium that came from Cal Orchids down in Santa Barbara, and it just has 5-foot high flower spikes. It's oncidium splinter. But I wanted to point out that this was in the back corner of the greenhouse last summer. And if you get these crinkly accordion pleated leaves, this shows that I did not do a good job of keeping it properly hydrated, and these will never fully recover, and it's due to water stress. So if you do see the accordion pleating on some of your orchid leaves, it just means you need to up your moisture game, water more frequently, or put them in an area where there's a little more humidity, and those problems should not arise, but keep an eye out for that. I think that's about it for the first week of February. One last thing I should mention, the number of dry rest requiring dendrobiums, which I have hanging up here on the top rail. The first and second week of February is pretty critical to give them absolutely no water. So this is the end of their rest season. They will start being watered slightly right after Valentine's Day. But for the first 2 weeks of February, water is withheld completely to finish off their dormancy. And then we'll start to see some new growth the end of February, early March. So hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be doing them, as I said, once a month, and we'll just take a real quick look at Elsie's Stonehouse, which is just coming into bloom, and this will be a more spectacular plant to look at next month. Okay, thanks for watching.